The last episode of this clash of ancient disease pools is taking place right now. The Yanomamo of South America live in and around the Amazon basin. The Yanomamo and the forests they live in are thought of as untouched, as the last virgin wilderness and people. But really that's a misconception. 400 years ago, slave plantations were set up on the coast to the north and south of the Amazon. They caused a dramatic change here. That deadly mix of measles, smallpox and malaria escaped into the rainforest, and it was particularly malaria which did the damage. Only now are the results of that damage being discovered. Our stereotype of South American rainforest people is of dart-blowing natives, hunter-gatherers from the time their ancestors came down from Alaska. But nothing could be less true.
The civilizations that we find in the archaeological record of this region for about 2,000 years before the European conquest seem very different from the peoples who live there today. In many ways, the history of cultures and peoples in these great Amazonian basins is similar to that of the ancient river basins of the Old World, like the Indus Valley, like the Nile, like Mesopotamia. People started in a very small way, they built up to something very substantial, and they created elaborate societies of highly complex organization and very dense populations. In our excavations this year in Brazil, in Monte Alegre, we seem to have found that these beautiful rock paintings, which anthropologists have really neglected, they appear to have been made by the very earliest Indians that we know of in Amazonia 10,000 years ago. These paintings have never, to my knowledge, appeared in the public eye before.
Other evidence of early Indian activity comes from the artificial mounds along the riverbanks. These are where they built towns of up to 20,000 people.
We saw a whole slew of indigenous societies of great variety and brilliance. Step by step, each of these cultures made great innovations. The earliest pottery in all of the New World was made in the heart of Amazonia. And these were the societies that bit the dust practically within 100 years of the arrival of the Europeans. Decimated by disease, these people disappeared.
Amazon Indians today live very differently from 4 centuries ago. What you see now are people living in what seems to be virgin rainforests. But it's now known that as far back as the time of Jesus, the indigenous peoples were clearing huge areas of jungle to plant maize. The pollen in this soil has shown that crops grew here for 1,500 years. Longer, in fact, than a lot of the present rainforest. Their areas of land cleared for maize fields stretched for up to 40 miles in every direction. In fact, ironically, the destruction of the Indian population by European and African diseases meant that the trees could grow back.
But many things happened to them in this terrible time of conflict and change, and it appears that the conditions of life for Indians became much worse, much less favorable than in ancient times. And you get very strange phenomena, such as loss of stature. People become much shorter in many areas than they were in ancient times. When we excavate ancient people, we find that many of them are very tall as the average height in the United States today, for example. So that when we look at the ancient skeletons before the European conquest, we see very little evidence of infectious disease in Amazonia. Very, very little. A few people have some signs in their bones of the lesions that infectious disease caused, but very few people. For the most part, people were tall and strong and well-grown.
The Yanomamo may be part of that original culture, Or they may be a group who came in from the forest fringe once the early inhabitants had died off. Whatever their beginnings, they've had about 300 years of isolation in the rainforest, more than enough to turn them back into a virgin population. Gold has been found here. The Yanomamo have become part of a wild and destructive Brazilian frontier. The new invaders come and flush away hillsides to find their precious metal. The mercury used to extract the gold is poisoning people and the wild animals which used to provide food. And trees are being ripped down in a rapid and uncontrolled way. Apart from new diseases like measles, it's forced a pace of change on the Yanomamo to which they're finding it hard to adapt. This story may have modern trappings, but it's been the same pattern for the last 500 years since the old world met the new. It's just that this is almost the last time it will happen. One in 5 Yanomamo who come in contact with Europeans die. The survivors are forced to beg. The illness and the humiliation mean they'll lose their identity and almost certainly slowly mingle into the invading crowds and disappear. The human face of the globe has been changed by people's vulnerability. The Yanomamo are clearly in a fragile state, but we shouldn't kid ourselves that we're invincible.
TLC will continue with C.
The world is in a perilous condition which is dangerous and unpredictable. These children are under the thinning Arctic ozone. Thinning caused by distant people, perhaps the vehicle exhaust from a limo in Los Angeles. The extra ultraviolet light may eventually deplete their immune systems, making them susceptible to an ancient disease like leprosy. Most of the world is easily within reach nowadays. Even the remote part of Iceland, which suffered the measles epidemic in 1904, isn't so isolated anymore. The Earth has become less diverse. There are fewer cultures. There are fewer animals and plants. And this lack of diversity means we and our environments are potentially weaker. We share vulnerability across the globe. Now any of us can be the Amerindians of tomorrow, and the cause won't be as much germs as the untoward effects of human activity. There aren't separate disease pools nowadays. The world is small and vastly more interconnected. And we have to care what happens in every corner, because it's now all in our backyard.
Railroad trains and ironclad ships play a role in what was destined to be the first truly modern combat on Smithsonian's great battles of the Civil War. Next, after that, TLC has battles that changed the world.